Oh, welcome to the HostAfrica, where we discuss web hosting and how it relates to business, the individual, and its general role in society. I'm Ashwin, your host, and in today's episode, we've got Henry Walton, musician, businessman, and co-founder of Outsell Sales. Henry, let's jump right into it. Can you share your journey from musician to entrepreneur? Some stats show that more than 90% of musicians fail. So was like what motivated your change from musician to entrepreneur, and like was the cutthroat nature of artistry one of the reasons for your shift?
That's Ashman. That's a coming in with the big question right off. I wonder how that stat compares with people starting businesses. I think it's probably pretty close, right? So I guess some context, briefly. So yeah, I mean, I was in my first band when I was about 11. It was not really, listenable, but we banged stuff and we kept going. I think a lot of this stuff is often about just perseverance, right? So we kept going and we got a lucky break when we were mid-20s and we signed a big publishing deal with Sony BMG, and we signed a fairly big record deal, and we ended up touring and played in Japan, Australia, Mexico, across the States a couple of times, across Europe. It's a long story, so I'm going to give you the really short version. Music is a hobby at a certain point, and then once other people get involved and money is put in, it's a business like any other, and people want to make their money back. So we had a lot of money that was pumped into the band. I think there were certain goals that everyone thought would happen to do with radio in the UK and to do with sales. It didn't happen. I think the type of team that we put together, essentially as the musicians, we have to take responsibility, a bit like founders, right? We made decisions to take certain management companies on certain labels. What you hope in a situation like ours, or like with investors, right, is that they wait. And one album is not a particularly long time. We were playing the long game, of hoping kind of 2 or 3 albums to build this project slowly. However, if you're going to accept a lot of money, people don't really have that patience, and they want to see success, big success pretty quickly. So we lost our teams, we lost our deal. And at that point, we were starting to get married and we were a little bit older. We'd been doing this for a long time. And I think everyone kind of felt like it was time to make a change. So we've all remained in touch with music in different ways over the last 10 years. But really, that was what led me to kind of go out and start my own business. I think just the caveat on this is you say, well, I think you mentioned something about failure. I don't see it as a failure. I think or most musicians, I don't think they fail. I think a lot of the time, they just stop because it's not in their means to do it any longer. So and I think it's often the same with, business. It has like a weird connotation to that. But I've known in London for a long time, there's entrepreneurs that will kind of define themselves by their failures. They'll be like, "Hey, how you doing?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm great. I've had like 4 failed startups," and it takes on a very different meaning, right? Because ultimately it's about gaining the experience, and a lot of the time, some of these things are within your control, and sometimes they're outside of your control as well. So yeah, that ended and started my own business essentially.
Okay. I mean, thanks for adding the caveat actually, because I think part of me kind of has a sense that you never stop being a musician. It's kind of why I introduced you as a musician instead of a former musician, because I think it's a skill that you still have, and I think I agree. Maybe saying that more than 90% of musicians maybe fail, I think that's a bit harsh, because I think perhaps maybe I was looking at it as more of the financial aspect as opposed to kind of what you've done. Because I mean, whether you guys became like the next Iron Maiden, or like things turned out the way they did for you guys, I mean, you still kind of accomplished things. You still toured, you still created music, which which I mean, in retrospect sounds like far back, but I mean, this is like literally 2 minutes ago. But I think failure seems a bit harsh of a word to use. Yeah.
Well, it's an interesting one, isn't it? And within business or anything, if they failed or they didn't manage to make a living from it, yeah, okay. But it's also about whether that's the goal or not. I mean, I think, businesses in some ways are much easier to kind of wrap the concept around, because the business's modus operandi is to make money. And if it doesn't make money, it's failing. The business will fail and you will have to do something else. But I think there's another, we probably haven't got time for it now, but I think, connected to this is a really interesting conversation around goal setting, and how you perceive kind of how you set goals, how you perceive reaching goals or not reaching them. And I think that's something that, I've kind of taken from music and that experience very much into business.
Oh, well, I'm not sure what your time constraints are, but I mean, I'd be happy to dive into like setting goals if you feel you have the capacity for it now. Like how do you go about setting those? Like what did you learn from your bout as a musician, or let's say a musician trying to make a living from music in setting goals?
Sure. So I mean, sure. Certainly in a business setting, right? The last agency that I grew during COVID, we were 5 people at the beginning, and then we were 20, and then we scaled it during COVID to 150 people. We had, someone within the organization on the board that was sitting there, was very excited about like, this can be a 50 million pound business. And we were all going, woo, yeah, great. And actually, did we want it to be a 50 million pound business? Sometimes there's these arbitrary goals that come out, and then you start kind of planning towards something that maybe is the wrong goal. Like in that situation with the last agency, I probably would have been happy to make it into a 2 or 3 million pound agency and sell it. But the fact that we kind of had this narrative and mentality going around that it could be a 50 million pound one, we made a whole bunch of decisions based off that I think were wrong. And I actually think it's the same thing with the band. I think we were too young and inexperienced at that point to really recognize what our goal was. And we didn't have clear goals. But actually, the way that we worked at it, I think we had very, very high goals, very ambitious goals, to be kind of one of the most, I guess successful bands in the world. We would look at Radiohead and go, right, that's what we want to do. But equally, I don't think we were that honest with ourselves about that, or what would have to happen to do that. For example, what team would you need to do? How does it affect making your music? What creative, decisions does it affect, and how does it affect them? So I think one of the things that I've learned in that process is really about trying to be very honest with yourself about what your goal is and why it is. Like it has to mean something rather than be a kind of an arbitrary goal. And then I think you can make much better strategic decisions based off that goal. It's very popular in tech and in startups to be like, yeah, okay, we're going to make this, especially if you take funding, to go like, we're going to make this into £100 million business. Okay, cool. Are you happy to do that as a founder? Are you happy to be answerable to other people, to investors, to boards? It's a very different life. So yeah, I think for me, it's just about trying to understand perhaps the reason of why you're doing something and being honest with yourself about those goals. And then if you get that right, you generally make much smarter decisions, I think.
How would you say you kind of reconcile like long-term planning, like in terms of goals versus short-term planning? Because I'm just thinking of like the example you presented where like you thought maybe a 2 to 3 million pound company would have been perhaps maybe more suitable than going like much further up over 100 million pounds. At what stage do you feel we're looking too far forward and we kind of aren't paying attention to the resources or facilities we have now that can actually take us there? It's like there's this massive gap between 2 and 3 million pounds and 100 million pounds, like how do you manage that?
So I think there's a cadence, right? And there are frameworks for this stuff. So have you heard of the concept called BHAG, or Big Hairy Audacious Goal?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So it's a bit like, if your company has, like a mission statement, and their mission, I can't remember any like clearly off the top of my head, but it might be like, for, I think Apple's one was to have, a home computer in every home in the world, or something like that was their kind of big vision. And then off the back of that, you might have like your big, hairy, audacious goals, which is a goal that is set that is really, really hard to achieve. But it means that around this goal, there is a culture of trying to do difficult things, and trying to go beyond where you might get to if you just run the normal path, right? So at the moment with Outsell, the business is doing great. We could easily go, oh, well, let's just not do anything and we'll continue at this kind of rate. But no, we have a very, very ambitious goal, and that's set by big targets, across a 5-year period that are going to be very hard to reach. I don't know if we'll reach them or not, but it's about how that drives us and how it gets us to think about the business. And that means that we're very ambitious about the type of people that we employ, about the quality of our execution, about how good our processes are. It makes us try and be the best in what we're doing. However, then I think you also need to come down that from a level and go, okay, well, what are your yearly goals? And how do you break that into quarterly goals? And there's a framework here that's called rocks and pebbles. So rocks are typically the things that are, they're really hard to achieve. They might take a quarter, and then you've got pebbles that take a week. So there's this kind of cascading, of all of these things that come down to like how you achieve your goals on a daily basis. And I think if you go through this process in a fairly methodical manner, that goal that seems so lofty in 5 years' time is actually achievable. And it's not achievable if you don't have that framework. You have to cut it up into smaller chunks. And if each day, each week, each month, each quarter, each year, you achieve those goals or somewhere near them, you're going to achieve your 5-year goal or somewhere close to it. And I think this is the other thing. Most people would say that, if you set these targets, if they're too easy, that you don't have to do much to reach them, and there's no satisfaction. If you set too difficult goals, then you get demotivated teams because it's just so far off. But most people would say that if you set a goal and you get 75% there, 60% there, most people would be happy. So there's this kind of balance in how high you set your targets. And by the way, this is just because it's our domain, but when it comes to, we do a lot of sales coaching and training. It's the same thing for sales reps. So if you set a commission model and benchmarks for sales reps that are too high, they'll very, very quickly get demotivated. If you set them too low, they don't really need to improve upon themselves or upon the baseline in order to do anything. So there's no point. You've got to find this kind of sweet spot. And that often, again, for sales reps, that keeps changing. There's also an interesting psychology thing of kind of getting sales reps to actually set their own targets, because often when people have a target put onto them and they don't understand the mechanics or the fundamentals of how that target is set, that's also demotivating. Whereas if you say to someone, right, here is where we are at the moment, here's the status quo, we want to set you set your own target of where you think you can get to. Often people will set, great targets that are hard to reach, and they'll often do better at reaching them because it's their target, they set it.
Okay, that's pretty interesting. I think we definitely come back to the goal section of that, but I just want to backtrack a bit to your transition again, and I want to find out what were some of the biggest challenges you faced during your transition from musician to active musician. Yeah, from active musician to businessman and entrepreneur, and how did you overcome them?
I think the biggest one is probably just an identity shift. When you do one thing for a very long time, transitioning into doing something else in a different environment with different types of people is a big shift. We like to feel useful, right? And we like to kind of feel that what we do is good and we know how to do it. So going from music and being on stage into growing and leading teams, there was a lot of imposter complex there. I think from what I've found over the last 10 years, and we work, exclusively with founder-led organizations, is that the same thing actually exists with founders and entrepreneurs. very different from managers. Founders and entrepreneurs are often creative. They're really chaotic. They're very unstructured. They have big ideas. And then as the business grows, generally that person is probably not the right person, to do that. And they bring someone else in. And the question then is kind of the same, for as it was for me when I was a musician and then turned entrepreneur, which is if you've been leading your organization for ages, or you've been leading like sales and that's then taken away from you, what do you do next? It's the same thing. It's a bit of a kind of an identity crisis, being like, what do I do with my time? That's how am I useful? And we see this in founder-led organizations a lot. And I think that's often why people sometimes cling on to things too long, because they're not sure on where they would go next. It's also often why founders like start new stuff all the time, right? Because it keeps them in that kind of comfort zone of starting stuff and launching stuff. So yeah, I think that's the main challenge. I think is probably around identity, yeah, and network. Actually, kind of a weird, bit of a vague one, but you have to build a new network. I had a reputation in London and within music. I've been working with it for a long time. I had a lot of very strong contacts, all the way out to the top of the music industry. Which suddenly, you go into building a digital agency. I don't have any contacts in marketing. So I think that's a really big one. And I think it's tied to the imposter kind of complex as well.
I mean, listening to that, it kind of sounds like if you fixate on it too much, you could end up in an existential crisis of sorts. Because I mean, like you said, you kind of attach your identity to this thing that you were doing. I mean, of course, we aren't fully just the things we do. I mean, we can kind of, like you did, you can change and grow and, be whoever you want to be. But how did you avoid that particular trap?
I don't think I did. I think it's just necessity. When you get to the end of your 30s and I was unemployable on paper. I'd been in bands my whole life. So getting to the end of 30, you have to find a way to make money. And I didn't want to go and work for someone else. So I started making websites, basically. I saw the websites that people had. They were awful. I thought I could do better. And I could do better. And I could do it in a fraction of the time that most people could. So I just did that. And I think necessity is often is probably the best driver. All of our businesses that we've run and I've run with my brother have been born out of necessity. Like we've wanted something, or we've seen a gap in the market that causes, a real difficulty for people, and you fix it. I think that's what most entrepreneurs do. Is there's this kind of annoyance with there's this problem. It's like, why is it like that? That's really annoying. I'm going to fix it. And then that's how the business is born, because you're solving real pain points. And again, I think that's a large part of what we do now with Outsell is exactly on that. It's working to try and help our clients understand, well, what is that real pain? Not talk about, especially in the marketing world, and I've been in it for long enough, there's a lot of fluff in terms of how people describe what they do. And that's okay in some of the kind of B2C world, but in B2B, it generally doesn't work that well. You just need, and you can't really sell features either. You just sell solutions to pain points. And pain points are real. They cause people pain. They're annoying. They manifest themselves in a certain way. And if they do that in a strong enough way, people are geared towards taking an action to solve it and will spend money solving it. If you get that right, then it's a really interesting position to be in. If you haven't recognized the pain point deeply enough, but that's what you're talking about, you'll always struggle to get people to pay for it, because it's like they're not living with the pain. Pain is what gets us to take action, right? So you guys do hosting, right? The pain of having a bad hosting provider is the fact that, I don't know, it's a poor service, or when the site goes down, the customer support is terrible and it takes them 5 days to reply to you. And when they do reply to you, it's someone that gives you either a standard answer or gives you such technical knowledge, you're like, well, you're the hosting people, you're meant to do it, So the pain, I think, for hosting people, it's not hosting, right? I don't live with the pain of not being able to host my website. The pain for me is about bad customer support with hosting, or overly technical issues, or like having hosting but not having another suite of services. So then I have to go to domains, and then I have to do backups, and I have to do all this other stuff. So uncovering that, I'm now completely forgotten how we got onto this, but the pain point is is key. How did we get onto that?
I'm actually not sure because I mean,
I know, because it was avoiding the trap and me making
oh yeah,
websites.
the existential trap. Yeah. I mean, you're saying that your brother and yourself started your company out of necessity. Do you feel like if there wasn't that drive for necessity, let's say you were well enough off that you didn't need to work. Do you think you'd still be starting companies, or do you think you'd explore something else?
I've no idea because I'm not in that situation. But generally, when I've met people that have exited from and have made a lot of money, I think there are some people obviously that remain super involved, super hungry to fix things, and there are others where they might lose a bit of drive because that motivation is somewhat gone. I don't know, and I don't know with myself. I like fixing problems, and I like people. And if I have those two things, then there's always a really strong motivation to do something. So I don't know. Perhaps we'll have to speak again in like 3 years when I've made lots of money, and then I can tell you whether I'm doing anything new or not. I don't know.
Okay, well, I mean, the hopefully things go according to plan, and you will have made a lot of money. Because I mean, I think there's always going to be people and problems around unless we blow ourselves into oblivion or something. But yeah, I think
But it's
I mean,
but it's an interesting one, right? Because you have to have the real motivation to do it, because starting and growing and scaling businesses, it's good fun, but it's also really painful. So I think it's very hard, to motivate yourself unless you're completely in love with the problem. And that's the way your brain works, to get up at, 5 every morning and work 12-hour days again and again and again, when you're working on something that perhaps most people don't recognize, and people are going, I don't see it, like it's nuts. And you have to keep going and keep going and keep going. And it takes, however much time then, either for it to not work or for it to work, and you to be kind of vindicated for something that you saw. But there's a lot of pain, good pain, but a lot of pain involved in this as well. So yeah, I think sometimes if, people, if they get too comfortable, perhaps there's less driver to, to take these things on. I don't know.
uh, I mean, in a sense of I'm thinking of training, like going to gym. I think that if we were to use that analogy, I think it would make a lot of sense because the thing with like training or going to gym is that you don't like go there for a year and you're like, well, I've done it, I've done all the gym, and it's like it's a success and thank you. I'll see you guys like in 5 years time maybe to catch up or something. It's like something you need to keep doing, like if you want to have that physique or whatever the case is, and it's I suppose it's different with maybe let's say financial monetary success, because I mean you can kind of get it, and depending on how well you operate with that, you can kind of be sorted for the rest of your life. I suppose maybe it's linked to your purpose. I don't know. I think we're getting a bit too deep, and also going on a side path here as to where I intended. But I suppose I think it's probably linked to your purpose. Because I mean, like, if I wouldn't say purpose, but what you consider your purpose to be. Because I mean, if you think or if you feel that helping people is what you are meant to be doing, then I suppose you always find an issue or a problem where you can kind of be solving that, you know?
I think you'll always find it. I think the point for me is, or how I understand it, is that you probably will still see it, but the motivation to do something about it over a sustained period, is a difficult one. It makes me think, talking, you've heard this thing that, between money doesn't make you happy, right? Except up to about $100,000 per year, depending on where you live. After that point, that point it makes you happy. After that point, there is not like infinite increased amount of happiness. And that's ultimately because at this point, you don't have to worry about bills. You don't have to worry, so much about, travel or rent or cars or whatever. Like all of those things are kind of taken care of. So you keep earning, and it's not like you get exponentially more happy as you go. Happiness and is driven by purpose and driven by mission and being useful. So yeah, I think it's a super interesting topic, but I don't know. For me, it's always been trying to marry necessity of like having to work and also then working on things that you enjoy working on. Helping people achieve great things, helping businesses survive, feeling like you're growing a great team. That was always a really big one for me. That the culture that we have within our team and organization is really strong, and that people enjoy coming to work and they feel like they're part of a community and they feel like they're building something. And this is kind of relating back to the goal conversation that we had. You're giving, if you do that right, you're giving people a sense of purpose. They're not just coming to work and going, right, I'm going to get my money. They're going to work and going, this is hard, but it's also exciting because we're building something really interesting here that's of real value. And if you can communicate the vision, well, then I think, interesting things start to happen in terms of people adopting that mission and that purpose, which is obviously really, really important.
I think it's kind of makes me think of what you said a while back of the sales rep like setting his own targets, and what you just mentioned now is like how do I put this? I think a common thing that maybe companies kind of experience is like the alienation with or the employees experiencing a level of alienation because like they aren't I mean it's kind of like you said, they're going to work to like get their paycheck, and it's their life is happening maybe after working hours, as opposed to them being like married to what they are doing. Not in the sense that work is their life, but like it's something that actually has meaning or purpose to them. But I want to go back to the goal setting before we go on another philosophical tangent. Were there any skills you learned from your music career that you found helpful in running a business? I mean, I know you mentioned the goal setting, and I'm sure networking probably became was a bit easier for you as well, having to kind of connect with lots of different musicians and other artists and people in the industry. Like what other skills did you learn from that time that you took with you?
Do you want the honest question or the kind of hindsight question answer?
I mean, I think we could do both. Depends. Whichever one sounds best. We'll keep that one in, and then we'll cut the other one.
So, what skills did I learn in music that was transferable, I guess, to business? Sounds really obvious, but and having a plan, and whether you want to call that a strategy or whatever it is, and actually executing upon that and seeing it through, I think is probably one of the most important things. Team building, like how you build a team. And I would love to say that we acquired these skills when we were doing it and we executed it all perfectly, but actually it was about making the mistakes and getting most of these things wrong. Not the plan side, I think we did that pretty well, but team building, I think we got quite wrong. So I learned a lot about how you put a team together and how that's aligned to your goals and to your plan. That was a really big learning. I think also then probably the same thing, but a band is a funny thing in that ours was a democracy. We split everything kind of 5 ways. We all had equal voices. It makes it very, very difficult to execute upon a vision when you have that model, because you essentially have 5 visions and they're all getting slightly diluted by each other. Now, what can happen is that in terms of collaboration, you can come up with some really, really interesting stuff and stuff that is unique. But I also think it's very difficult to steer the ship, and often if you look at businesses, this is often why you have like the visionary and integrator role. You can really, I think, only have one visionary, and you can then have people that can feed into that vision process. But I think the visionary element is essentially a kind of solo role. So it gave me a little bit more understanding of that, but I also think it gave me a little bit more appreciation for that and where I sit. So I can kind of straddle lots of different things, right side equal right side brain, left side brain. I can do vision, but I can also sit and do, automations and integrations. And so I think it was about finding about kind of where I sit in that process. And again, this comes back to kind of building the team and ultimately, if you want to make a really good team, always hire people better than yourself. That was the same thing with the band. It was, if we wanted to make a music video, we wouldn't do it ourselves. We would find people that were really good at making music videos. And this we took straight into business. Like the worst founders that I've worked with are people that, they feel threatened by bringing other good people in and they don't want to let go of stuff. They want to control everything. And actually the best ones will hire people better than them in almost all the areas, and they should make themselves redundant, which is a tough thing for a founder to do, but it's normally the right thing for the business.
I know you mentioned you kind of had to figure out or navigate the imposter syndrome when you made your shift, but how else did your mindset change from being a creative artist to a business owner? Because correct me if I'm wrong, please, but just my perception of it is that if you're making music, you kind of, I'd say you're at the execution stage of the process, whereas if you're a business owner, you're kind of more strategic. Like, is that accurate? And like, how did you manage that shift?
I'm not sure actually. So I think musicians or creatives are very, very similar to entrepreneurs in that they have there's normally a vision of something. And then even if they don't know how to do it, they will find a way of making that vision a reality. And that is the same mindset for, I think, creators and entrepreneurs. I think the big difference is where you have like a manager. So, perhaps you have a business that's run by the founder and the entrepreneur for 5 years and it keeps growing. And then they bring in like a professional CEO. And this professional CEO has probably never run his own business before. He doesn't have that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, but he's amazing, or they are amazing at managing businesses. That's a very different skill set. And it's a very different personality type and way of thinking than the kind of, start something creative entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I hadn't considered it that way as the two of them kind of being the same, because I mean I don't play any instruments myself, so my perception of it was that I'm only kind of getting the end product, which is what the musician produced, but you're putting it that way kind of shines a light on a bit more of the details, where it's like they had to think of what they were going to produce, and obviously the end, like the consumer, me, just hears the end product, so yeah, I think that's really put that into perspective.
Yeah, there's normally the ones that get this right is that they create a world and the music is a part of that world. So if you look at, Lady Gaga, for instance, not a massive, listener or fan, but, hugely appreciate what she's done. It's not just the song, right? It's the whole world that she's created. And that's the aesthetic, it's the art, it's the music videos. Like, she obviously has a vision of like how she sees the world, or like the artist Lady Gaga, how she occupies the world. And she has to execute upon a whole load of different stuff to make that happen. It was the same with David Bowie, right? It was never just like a song. It was, a way that he saw the world, and that affected everything from how he dressed and how he inhibited different characters throughout the different stages of his career. That affects the artwork, it affects the live show, it affects the videos, it affects absolutely every component of it. And the artists that get that right, they're not just making a song, they're building a world, and then people want to enter into that world. And I think often that's the same thing as marketing, right? A product that's just a product without bad marketing is like, oh, okay. But if you build a world around it, you can do really interesting things. So with a lot of companies that are running go-to-market strategies using like product-led growth, the product on its own is like, oh, okay, it's just like a CRM or whatever it is. But the aura that they've built around it is very, very different. So Airtable, I think, was a great example of this, where you look at Airtable, cool, really cool tool, but it is essentially an interactive Google Sheets. Like that is what it is. But the way that it was talked about, the way that it was perceived was like, it was so much more than this. And I think that's because people were buying into the amazing branding and the amazing communication of Airtable, not just the fact that it was, interactive Google Sheets, which I know it's more than that, but I'm being a little bit reductive.
Yeah, no, I think I got that. I mean, a bit of an addendum on the creating worlds. Like as an artist, I'm not sure what kind of music you're into particularly, but there's other band that I think you may enjoy listening to, whether you like the genre or not. But I think you'd, as a musician, I think you'd appreciate kind of the work that they do. Starset, the entire world or universe is like centered around this technological dystopia, and all of their albums kind of tell the story from when they started to where it is now. And it's like each album that unfolds something new, and it's like each album tells a story, and each song is like a chapter in that story. It's quite interesting. It's the lead singer describes it as he describes their genre as cinematic rock. So there's a bunch of things going on in the song, but it's
Okay.
yeah, it's quite interesting in my
All
opinion.
right, nice, thanks. I'll have to check it out. I'll check it out.
Anyway, so coming back to you, like I mean, you founded or aided like quite a few businesses after your transition to businessman and entrepreneur. Like, what were some of the key resources or strategies that you used to teach yourself the ins and outs of business strategy and marketing?
So I didn't teach myself. I was taught by my brother. And I'm very lucky to have an older brother that's 10 years ahead of me in doing this and has started more businesses and has taken me along for the ride on some of them. And some of them we started together from start. So I think, the best resource possible is, finding yourself a good mentor or a good co-founder. I mentioned like Y Combinator, I think earlier. I don't know if this is still the case, but they don't accept companies or startups with one founder. It's just the chances of success are just kind of bottom out when you're doing it on your own. So doing it with someone, I think, is more valuable than anything else, and someone that complements your way of working and your skill set is incredibly important. I think the other thing is just doing it. You can read all the books that you like, and you can do all the courses that you want, but ultimately you only figure it out by doing it and taking the risk and making mistakes and failing and then going again. So I think those, if you do those two things, I think you're in pretty good stead. And obviously now with the internet, any other resources that you want, there's a million different places to get them from. Although I'd say now, actually, you can't really have this conversation without talking about co-pilots. If you have an idea now and you want to launch it, I mean, there's so many different co-pilots that you can use, that could develop, off fairly basic prompts, develop, a whole GTM strategy for you. There's one in ChatGPT at the moment, pre-made. I can't remember what it's called like your GTM strategist or something. And it's incredible. I mean, before, if you didn't know what you were doing, you'd have to go and hire someone, or you'd have to try and figure it out. But, within 10, 15 minutes now, suddenly it's like, oh, okay, you've got a content plan, you've got a go-to-market strategy, you've got, someone doing your market research and analysis for you. You can even do some kind of brainstorming in terms of business names or whatever it is. So, yeah, I think that wasn't a big resource for me then, but it's increasingly becoming a big resource, for us and our clients as we grow.
I mean, you mentioned something interesting because I do want to find out a bit more about some of the resources that you guys use. Not outsell sales particularly, but like some of the tech that you guys or that you are using to kind of stay on top of your game. But I'm gonna save that one for a bit later. Like I want to find out something that you mentioned in your background. You say that you outsourced the work early on when you started outsell sales. Like given everything that needs to be done when you're starting a new business, is this a strategy you'd recommend for most people, or was it just suitable for you guys at the time?
I think every business is different. I would say that there's one thing is that in the early stages, I think you have to sit in every seat for some period of time. Obviously, there are exceptions to that. So if you're not a developer and you've got an idea to develop something, I wouldn't maybe recommend trying to code, but I think you should sit in the sales seat. I think you should recruit people. I think you should sit in the customer service seat. I think you should sit in the project management seat, because otherwise you're too far removed from the reality of what's happening and how it works. And your job as the founder is to improve and to create and remove roadblocks. And if you haven't actually done any of those things, you're too far removed. And at the beginning, you won't have a team, that is able to do that for you. So I think, I think you can definitely outsource elements of it, but I don't think you can outsource everything. And obviously, if you outsource too much or at the wrong times, I think you always lose an element of control. So we've outsourced a whole bunch of stuff in different companies, and we've normally done it at the beginning, and we've been okay with giving up control because it's given us flexibility. So in the early stages, being rigid and having a lot of costs, piling up when it's uncertain about new revenue coming in is a dangerous situation to be in. So I would always value flexibility and agility, higher than having full control. So I think it's like with all these things, it's a bit of A, a bit of B. There are definitely functions I think that you can outsource with relatively little risk. Yeah.
So at what stage then do you like decide that okay, well, like I'm wearing all of these hats now, like as an entrepreneur, like at what stage do you decide, okay, since I'm wearing all of these hats, like maybe after a year, 6 months, 2 years, whatever the case is, like now's the time for me to step back from support, like growing a bit is we need an extra person. Is I can't manage all of these support calls or whatever the case is. Like that's the first part, and then the second part is like earlier you mentioned that an issue with some founders is they don't want to give up control. So I'm just trying to find where the middle ground is really.
Yeah. So again, different for every founder, every business, but I think you look at what happens, what's the worst that could happen if I step away from this function of the business. If you step away from sales too early as a founder, if you're doing like our clients, like big ticket sales in the B2B world, stepping away from sales too early means that your pipeline can grow up, dry up, and then you have no new revenue coming in, and money is the blood of the business, right? So if you don't have that, that's a very dangerous situation to be in. Whereas you could probably, move away from junior project management or some admin, very quickly, and it's not going to risk the business. So yeah, I think it just depends on the stage the business is at. Also, what your what your financials are like, and are you in a position to hire someone for that position? Is it time? So often a mistake that we see is that founders won't necessarily fully step back from sales, but they'll bring in a business development manager, to try and create more meetings and try and create more leads. And the founder will always say, I'm happy to sell, just give me the meetings. But they'll often do it way too early. So I think you want to do it at the point where there's so many leads that you're leaving money on the table, and at that point, you're like, right, there's no way I can handle this. There's, I can't do anything else but do sales calls. Okay, it's affecting the rest of the business. So at that point, you have to take that decision to hire someone else to help you. But if you don't have that, if you're not being inundated with leads, do you need to hire someone else to do that? No, you probably need to look at something else, within marketing that's going to help you generate more leads. And once you've got that leads and you've got a healthier lead pipeline of qualified leads, then you can hire a business development rep to start working those for you. So there's a whole sequence. I don't think there's an art. I don't think there's a science to it. I think there's just an art of right, okay, it's unmanageable at the moment and something's got to drop. And, if we don't do that thing, who are we going to get in to do it? Or is it better that we do it? And that's always a difficult conversation.
I mean, I guess yeah. I mean, it varies, I suppose. Like you said, I mean, in listening to you, I can see why it's hard to kind of get like a standard approach to figuring these things out. I mean, like you summed up with, is pretty much an art. Earlier you mentioned your team being in Cape Town, and obviously you are in Cape Town yourself. But after outsourcing all, or not all, but some of your tasks, why did you settle on Cape Town to assemble your team? Why not where you are based, or UK or America or anywhere else? Why
Sure,
Cape Town?
I mean, it's really easy one. We love the people in Cape Town. My brother and my business partner has lived there for the last 14 years. It's an incredible country with incredible people. I think we've found very good people in Cape Town that have a really good work ethic, that I think are excellent at client-facing stuff as well. English language, first language, time zone that's only, an hour or 2 hours different to the UK where we normally do business and have our clients. And obviously there's a cost benefit, as well. The job market is tough in Cape Town. So we can hire very, very good people. And I think often people that are much better than the people that we could get in the UK, but it's not as expensive. But so it's a combination of those things. We found it an amazing place to grow teams. But again, my brother is in Cape Town and he's lived there for the last 14 years. So, even though lots of our teams have been remote, there's obviously, that's a big driver in it as well.
Okay, I mean, just trying to perhaps get the scoop or the hack for the hiring process. I mean, maybe Cape Town's the gold mine, and only you guys knew it, and so just was.
Oh, I don't think so. I think lots of people know it. They're one of our great competitors in the UK for our last business that we actually wanted to sell to. We kept trying to convince them, like, hey guys, you should buy us. We've got our base in Cape Town. You've got everyone in the UK. And then about 2 years later, they just opened up their own office in Cape Town and just did the same thing. I mean, Cape Town, I just think it's just the people are great. The lifestyle is great. People are generally really happy when they come to work. They're great workers. They're people that we enjoy working with. And again, a lot of our stuff is client facing. Like we've been doing client facing businesses, predominantly client facing. It's not like manufacturing, or it's everyone's kind of, coding in the background. Pretty much everyone that we hire are in a client facing role of sorts. And Cape Town people are nice, I never really worry about putting people, if you've hired them, you expect that they're good enough, and then going and putting them in front of clients, I never really worry about that. Sure, we've got it wrong sometimes, but I love England. I'm English, but sometimes people can be quite grumpy, probably because of the weather and the rain. And I think most of the time I would rather put someone from Cape Town in front of a client than someone in England. Maybe that's really unfair, but yeah.
I mean, I suppose you have more experience with making that assessment than I do. But on the Cape Town front, I tend to agree, mostly because I am from Cape Town. But I'm gonna say that I'm unbiased. So yeah. um, you mentioned on LinkedIn that you never have more than 15 clients at any one time. Like what's the benefit of keeping such a small client base? And I mean, I know there's going to be, I mean, you'll mention that it's different for each company, but do you think this is a strategy that like more companies should adopt?
I have no idea about other companies. I only speak for our own experience. It comes back to goals again a little bit, and what sort of implementation or execution model do you put in place to do it? So our last agency, as I said, we service the small business market or micro business market in the UK. We had at one point, I think, 150 staff. We had something like 500 clients. It's a different set of painful problems. Like even invoicing and billing and HR is such a nightmare. And there are lots of benefits to it as well. But with Outsell, we wanted to remain boutique because we wanted to have a small team where we could be a little bit more agile. We could have a more integrated culture. So it was very hard to get like a really good culture going, 150 people. I think we did it, but right now, we're a small, lean team of 8 people. Also, my brother and I, we're actively involved in every single account. And I think this is, in some ways, it is the best way to be amazing at execution. And at some point, we will surely decide to, okay, maybe our limit's 30 or 40 clients. But at that point, we're no longer able to be involved in every single account. And it will throw up a different set of problems. And unless you're ready to do that, it was likely that quality will drop a little bit and churn will go up a little bit. So for us right now, because we're building, most of our clients are on a referral basis as well. So reputation is incredibly important. So yeah, it's the right model for us at the moment. We also, our clients, they're on retainers that allow us to not need hundreds of clients. So it comes back to your average contract value. Our last business average monthly contract was, I think, 350 euros a month. So to get to the sort of scale that we wanted, we needed a lot of clients. Right now, our fees are much higher than that. So we're able to put much more senior resources on it. So it's about blending the team, the execution model, the org structure you have with the business model, and then the types of clients that you can attract.
Okay, I mean it's pretty interesting because usually I'm thinking most companies given a chance to grow or expand themselves or their client base, they jump at the opportunity, right? But you guys said you're in a different, or you said you guys are in a different phase now. And I suppose that might change in the future. But do you tend to lean towards the idea that if something's not broken, like you shouldn't fix it? Because but based on how I'm hearing it, it sounds like everything's going pretty well right now. It's unless your explicit goal is to kind of grow the company or your client base, it doesn't seem like anything needs to change.
No, a lot has to change because we're very ambitious about the level of experience that we want to give to our clients. So I think we do a good job now. I think we do a very good job, but there is improvements in almost every single area of our business. And I think there's a very big difference between growing rapidly and scaling. And I think most businesses often talk about scaling way before they're ready to do it. Like, have you actually, got the ability to scale every process and in the business, whether it's finance, recruitment, customer service? And if you have, sure, then you can talk about scale and you can start to push the button. If you're not, growing too quickly or trying to scale is causes so much pain because everything breaks, right? So you need to have those things in place. I think growth is expensive, it's risky, it's really good, but you need to kind of manage it. So for us, we're trying to be extremely good with a limited number of clients at the moment, and we're constantly improving what we do. And we're still growing, and we will continue to grow, but we're going to do it at a rate that we can control to make sure that we kind of scale the quality of the execution with the growth rate. There's an analogy for this, right? So a friend makes beer, and he can make a really, really good homebrew beer, for, I don't know, 60 bottles or something. But scaling recipes is really hard. And scaling it to large amounts is both expensive, but also really hard in terms of retaining the quality. So there are certain things that you have to look at and be ready for, I think, before you decide to do that. It would be disastrous for us at the moment to go, and we could do it, by the way. We could suddenly, ramp up a whole load of operations that we're doing in terms of marketing at the moment and take on another 10 clients in the next 2 months. It would probably break the business because we're not ready to do that, and they would get an awful experience, and our reputation matters hugely. So at the moment, I think it's not that we're not ambitious about where we want to get to. It's just that we're trying to do it in a very structured and systematic way. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. It's not super clean, but yeah, we're trying to control it.
Okay, well, that's that makes sense. I mean, my thinking was that, I mean, I wasn't thinking you guys weren't ambitious. I mean, you've started a bunch of companies, so I imagine there's a fair bit of ambition going around there. I just my thought was that this is how do I put this? Like we're gonna create something that's maybe like bespoke, but growth isn't, we aren't going to be fueled by it. That was like kind of where the question was coming from, if that provides some context. But
I mean, there is another thing which, again, it comes back to goals, but it's like, what are you actually trying to achieve, and how big do you want the business to get to, and then what happens? So do you want to keep running the business for the next 20 years? Do you want to sell the business? Do you want to do a merger with another agency? These things come into it. I have the experience of scaling our last agency was not a particularly fun one. And I also value life and work balance. I've got 2 young kids. So it's different for everyone. And I think it's harder to know when is the right decision when is the right time to make certain decisions. But I think in some ways, if we look at my brother and I think we're very, very good at this stage, and up to, maybe double the size. After that, if someone, if there was the opportunity to scale the business, which there is, and there will be, are we the right people to do it? And not only are we the right people to do it, but do I also want to actually do that? Do I want to be part of that process and invite that pain on? I'm not sure that I am the best person to do it, nor do I want that pain. I think I enjoy the earlier stages of the business more than that part. So if someone wants to give us a load of money and they can do that and have that pain, I'm very open to it. On a serious point, the other thing is that if you're looking for an exit, if you have tried to scale and got it wrong, it's very, very hard to sell. So I think lots of people, potentially wait too long to sell because they perhaps have, much higher numbers in mind. But if you give it a crack and it doesn't work, that's not a particularly enticing offer. If you've tried to grow your company for the last 2-3 years in a whole load of different ways, different channels, and none of it's worked, there's quite big question marks over that. Whereas if your business has got to a point where it's growing, churn's really low, the EPS score and, net promoter score is amazing. Your acquisition model has been, proved out. Plus you've identified a whole load of other different acquisition channels, that you haven't really explored, but they're starting to show signs of working, that's a really nice moment, because no one can tell you that it won't work because they're all positive signs. Once you actually go and it doesn't work, that's a totally different story to tell, because now you have to tell the story of being like, yeah, well, we did and we had all these things, but it was a disaster. That's so, again, it depends on what you want to do with the business, right?
I want to take it back to your journey and maybe get some. Well, I mean, I suppose you've been dropping insight and advices for the past hour, but maybe this is geared to someone who's yet to start their own entrepreneurship journey, and it's like I want to find out like what advice you'd give to someone who wants to make that transition into a completely new field, and yeah, maybe start the business late in their career. I mean, I don't want to say late because I mean you started you're about in your 40s now, and I mean I wouldn't consider that late.
Are you meant to give my age away in a podcast? I'm joking. I'm joking.
Sorry about that.
I'm joking. It's fine.
But yeah, I mean, I don't consider that late, but I mean, I guess people are entering the workforce pretty a lot younger. Well, I mean, maybe that's also not a fair thing to say, thinking back like what 200 years ago, kids working in the mines and stuff. But I mean, you know what I mean? Like someone's trying to transition after being in a role or field for maybe 10, 15 years. Like what advice do you have for them?
I think you just have to do it. I think you have to try. And this is not my advice, but it's advice that many smarter people have given, many times before, which is we see the same thing again and again with people. And I've been guilty of this as well. You have an idea, you get really excited. You're like, right, I'm going to get some business cards printed. I'm going to do a logo. I'm going to buy a domain name. It's not a business, right? It's only a business if you can sell something and get people to pay for it. So I think first of all is like go out and speak to people, validate the idea, and do that until you're absolutely certain that there is a need, and that, like we talked about earlier, that there's real pain there, and that what you're thinking about and your solution, it doesn't need to be the perfect solution, but can solve that. And that people critically are kind of willing to take some sort of action, or pay something for it. I think if you can validate that first of all, then you've got a chance. Then it's just about do some version of it, because it's very likely that even after speaking to only 100 people, that it's not going to end up anything like that you think it is. So sitting there and over developing something, over strategizing it, you're going to tear it all up and start again probably in 2-3 months anyway. So don't waste the time. Like, get something up. It's the MVP approach, right? Get something up, get it working, see if you can validate the market, see if you can get someone to pay something for it. Yeah, I think do that and do it as quickly as possible, fail quickly and then move on. The other thing I think is, generally people have great ideas, but it all comes back to acquisition. How are you actually going to find clients for it and get them to pay for it? Because I've seen amazing ideas, on paper and in real life, but there's no acquisition model. You don't have a business if you can't find people that will pay for it. So, if it's B2C, sure, are you going to find people through organic social? Yeah, you might do. It's going to be hard, okay, so you're going to do paid. Maybe have you got the money? Have you tested out any of the paid channels? Are you going to use influencers? Like, just, you have to figure out the acquisition side of it. If it's B2B, basically none of those things for contract values that are kind of above 25,000 USD, none of those things work. Paid ads won't work. SEO is irrelevant. Content is pretty irrelevant. Like, it all comes back to meeting people and building relationships and developing those relationships over a long period of time. So no matter how good the product is, if you don't have the acquisition side sorted, you have a big problem.
Would you recommend perhaps upskilling or reading a couple of books, maybe doing a short course on that to try and maybe help kickstart your project or idea or business?
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, there's loads of stuff that you could read. I mean, the Lean Startup by, I think it's Eric Rawls, is like is a classic. But I mean, there's thousands of them. So yeah, I think reading stuff is good. But I guarantee I've read loads of these books. I can't remember most of the things in them, and most of them are not applicable to the situation that you're in. So and it's really hard when you're in that situation to kind of be like, oh, right, this is happening with my business. What happens now? I'm going to go and check the manual. It just doesn't work like that. So I think there's a great benefit to reading those books, and there's a sort of osmosis, of ideas that will, come into you. I also think often it's a mindset thing, that it makes you feel that you're in the right environment, and that what you're doing, you're not like this crazy person that's on their own that's had this idea. Is like lots of people have had these crazy ideas and have done it, but ultimately it does come through doing. Or anyway, that's been our approach, because neither of us studied business. Or actually, my brother, that's not true, my brother did. So I'm sure there are people out there that study business and do things in a very different manner. But it's a bit like musicians, right? I know lots of people that have gone to Berklee Music College in the US, and most of them aren't in bands, or have been in bands but never really done anything that artistically interesting, because they're trained and they've become kind of institutionalized and doing things in a certain way. This is right, this is right, this is right, this is the right way to do it. This is how you do that. Most of the greatest things I think that are created don't follow that path. They're chaotic and unstructured and opportunistic. And so I'm definitely being biased here, because that's my approach. But yeah, I think that answers the question, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. I mean, the reason why I ask is because I'm just trying to maybe find a middle ground between just starting, like later on in your career, versus studying forward. Because I mean, you probably know better than me, but based on how I see it, I wouldn't want to just start something and have zero clue of what's going on. I mean, I want to have some background, So yeah, I guess that the reason why I asked was just to kind of marry those two ideas.
It's really hard. I totally get that. I don't know. I don't know if like Udemy micro courses are the answer. I think it's probably more about knowing something. If you do what you know, yes, you might not know how to run and start a business, but you know that area, that domain extremely well. And I think it comes back to, if you know the domain, the area particularly well, then you know the customers really well and deeply, and you also know what's broken. And if I think you know how to fix it, then in the early stages, you're a long way there. Yes, you will need to get help communicating that and kind of putting it into a product. And I think there you could definitely look at different resources, and there's, I mean, so much stuff everywhere. HubSpot, it's got just the academy there, all the content, it's incredible. So I think then it's more about like, right, I know that there's a problem. I kind of know I know how I want to fix it. How do I perhaps turn that into a product, or how do I position that? A quick Google or a quick chat with ChatGPT will really help you with this. I also think it goes back to what we said earlier, which is a partner. Find someone that perhaps has done it before, and then your chances of success, are just whoop. But if you're doing it on your own, you've never done it, yeah, it's hard.
I mean, I suppose with finding a partner, you're gonna have to market yourself to the partner as well, to kind of like to show that you have some benefit. But I think that's a different kind of problem altogether. I wanted to go back to the resources or that you kind of touched on it earlier when you mentioned having a co-pilot. And I mean, basically want to find out, like, with a team as small as yours, like how do you guys leverage tech or AI to make things like simpler for yourselves? Because I mean, what you said, you guys are 8.
Yeah.
The Again, I wouldn't know. I don't have my own business, but I feel like 8 people, like, running everything seems tough.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we don't, we have 15 clients, right? So it's not, there are businesses around with, 2 or 3. I think, our B2B, this is a tech company in the marketing space. Pretty sure they have like 3 full-time clients and they're like 10 million ARR revenue. So it depends. It depends on the business. We're very manualized in terms of what we do. However, that said, we use some automation stuff at different stages. So if we're, let's say if we're doing outreach for LinkedIn campaigns and we use a tool called Expandy, we only use that for kind of top of funnel type stuff just to automate connections. We don't do it in terms of messaging because it doesn't really work particularly well. It's a bit like, well, for our types of clients, but we use it to save a lot of time in terms of connecting with decision makers and champions at target organizations. We use things like Zapier and Make to do automations. So for example, you don't want to manually input data from Expandy into HubSpot. You just run via a webhook and Make, it'll automatically push new contacts into HubSpot. We use a tool called Clay to do data enrichment, which is really, really good. And then we use kind of custom GBTs. So for each client, we create a custom GBT and then we create a knowledge base for that client. So it'd be like all of their onboarding docs, like their go-to-market strategy, their business strategy, their mission statement, their team structure, onboarding for employees, onboarding for clients, like anything that we can get about that client, we put it into the knowledge base for the GBT. And then when we need to know something about that client, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to go and look for something or ask someone. You just ask your co-pilot, oh, remind me about, this for this client, and it will go and retrieve the data. But also then what's interesting here is that you can use it for research and kind of help with strategy for that client. So if you want to, let's say we have a new client that comes in that's in the cybersecurity, like we know our space incredibly well in terms of sales and marketing and B2B founder-led companies. We're not from cybersecurity though, right? So especially like the senior people in our organization, our challenge is to get to know a business very, very quickly, and using a custom GBT to help us understand all of the kind of subtleties and nuances about cybersecurity and like the types of accounts that we're trying to approach, or the people that, the roles that they have, or how departments are structured. Yeah, then that's a massive time saver as well.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I think that gives some practical insights into how to maybe streamline things a bit for any of our entrepreneurs who will be listening and looking for maybe tools that they can use. I just want to find out, like, you're good to mention like those tools that those aren't like trade secrets or anything. I don't want to.
No, it's fine. The reason, I mean, it's an enablement piece is because we're very confident that most of our clients don't know how to use them, and getting them to all to work together. It's a bit like you guys with hosting. I mean, you could explain, sure, hosting to your clients. Are they going to go and actually do their own hosting, set up their own servers? I mean, I'm probably not saying it in the right terms. No, they're not going to, because that's not their business, right? They have the stuff that they're focused on. So the magic is in kind of pulling all these things together and productizing it and making it work in an extremely streamlined manner, so that why would they go and set that up on their own? Like, it's so much pain. It's going to be much more expensive. You're going to have to hire people to know how to do it. That person's going to leave. Then you're going to have to hire someone else. They don't get trained properly. Like, it's a nightmare. So yeah, I mean, it's no trade secrets at all. I think it's more about what you do with them and how you use them and how they're integrated with everything else. That's where the magic is.
Okay, sweet. It's I mean, something you mentioned now reminded me of this, and I thought of it earlier while we were talking. It's just that I think maybe innovations is not the right word, but I think the market for convenience is it's pretty much, it's incredible. I mean, as long as you find something that provides some level of convenience, I think you tend to, I wouldn't say tend to, but I think you have a better chance of kind of making things work. I mean, I'm just thinking of something simple like Mr. Delivery or like Uber Eats, or I'm not sure what you guys have in Cyprus, but I mean like the who would have thought a simple idea of like getting food from one location to another would like be as popular as it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 10 years ago, or whatever it was, if someone said, this is, how everyone will get their food, you'd probably, maybe 10 years ago, you would have been, that's a great idea. But 50 years ago, you'd be like, that doesn't make any sense at all. So, yeah.
So, well, for someone looking to like make the plunge into starting their own business, I mean, we kind of mentioned 10, 15 years in their career that they were like, how will they know the time is right for them? Because I know, I mean, kind of with you, like you things perhaps didn't go as planned when you were doing music full time. It's like you kind of needed to make a change. Like how is it for someone else? Do they need to? Should they wait for like something to happen? Should they decide on their own? Like, okay, I've had enough of this, or like what's the deal?
Well, firstly, I'm not a life coach nor a business coach, so I don't know, and I don't feel that comfortable. I have my experience, and it's totally different for everyone else. But I mean, just talking from my experience, I don't. There's never been a right time. There's always just been a time that I've kind of had to do it, and I felt like I needed to do it. I think maybe with certain things, what I have learned is that if you look for the right time, you don't end up doing them because there normally isn't a perfect time. And we were talking a little bit about kids, at the beginning, and you can cut this out if you want, but you said to me, you don't know if you're ready, and you're not. I definitely wasn't ready, to have kids. I don't, this idea that there's this kind of perfect time to have kids when everything's like your life is sorted out and you know what's going on. I don't think that really happens in reality. And I think it's the same with businesses. I think my, one, not regret or kind of learning with stuff is that there's normally like a period of time where you know that something's not quite going to work out. And that's the time to kind of be doing something else, even if it's alongside what you are doing. Because if you, let's say, for example, if you have a job and you're not happy in that job and you would really like to run your own business, stopping that job, employers are going to hate me for saying this, but it's true. But stopping that job and then, being like, oh, now I'm going to do my own business is generally a really bad idea because you've lost your job. There's so much pressure on this new thing to generate income that it makes you make strange decisions and not enjoy it. Like, you're far better off starting to make small steps about the new company 6 months, a year before you get to that place so that you can actually understand whether there is a business there. Can you validate the idea? Can you even start to get some revenue in? So I think there's this, even with running your own business, at some point I will move away from outsell because we'll get other people that are better than me at running it. And I will need to think about doing something else. It puts a huge amount of pressure on that. If I do it once, I'm suddenly like not at outsell. Like, I would like to start that process and think about it much, much earlier on. What am I going to do with my time? Like, what's the business going to look like? I'm constantly thinking about these things even now because it's how my brain works. But it's also, there's a useful mechanism to that because you're cycling through ideas and you're going, oh yeah, this is a great idea. So this is definitely like, this is the one. And then you think about it for 3 months. You're like, that's a terrible idea. But if you do that once there's some pressure on it, it's really hard. So I think it's kind of better to be doing it almost, much earlier on, cycle through the ideas, play around with them. No, that's not a good idea. And then by the time that, you do need to make that transition, you've got something that perhaps has a better chance of survival or success.
Okay, I mean Thanks for that. I mean, well, like you said, not a life coach, but I think your experience like offers insight that maybe people who's like I said, looking to make the plunge or haven't made it yet. I think it'll perhaps give them something to ponder or think about
Oh,
because
I hope
uh,
so. I hope
yeah,
it's useful.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it will be. But yeah, let me not hold you any longer. I mean, Henry, it's been fun getting to know you. I think you're a very interesting person. Some cool stories. I mean, we'll probably get you on again. But yeah, that about sums up our time together. As usual, for all your hosting needs, feel free to check out our website. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn if you're into that kind of thing. You can find Henry online. We'll have his details, his company contact details, spam them in the show notes. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to hear about, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, thanks for listening to Those African. Goodbye.